Here is the reformatted story. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the massive viewing window of Bastion Prime's command center. The sight never got old. Thousands of ships moved in perfect formation around the giant space station. Some were military vessels with their gray hulls and weapon arrays. Others were civilian transports bringing supplies and people from across human space. All of them looked tiny next to Bastion Prime itself. The station was humanity's greatest achievement. It stretched 50 kilometers from end to end. Its rotating sections housed 50 million people, scientists, soldiers, diplomats, families, all living and working in the jewel of human civilization. The station served as the heart of the Terran Federation. Every major decision about humanity's future in space was made here. Sarah had been the station's commander for 5 years. She knew every corridor, every system, every person who mattered. Today felt different, though. There was tension in the air that made her skin crawl. "Admiral, the Kathvar delegation has arrived," said Lieutenant Torres from behind her. "They're requesting immediate audience in Conference Room Alpha." Sarah turned away from the window. The young officer looked nervous. Everyone had been nervous lately. The Kathvar Coalition had been making threats for months. They claimed humans were expanding too fast, taking resources that belonged to older species. Their demands grew bolder each week. "How many ships did they bring?" Sarah asked. "Just one, ma'am. The diplomatic vessel Supremacy, but our sensors show it's heavily armed for a diplomatic ship." Sarah nodded. The Kathvar always showed their strength, even during peace talks. It was their way. The coalition controlled dozens of star systems and hundreds of worlds. They had been the dominant power in this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. To them, humans were newcomers who needed to learn their place. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. And Lieutenant?" "Yes, ma'am. Make sure security knows about those weapons. Diplomatic immunity doesn't cover starting a war in my conference room." Sarah walked through the station's corridors toward the diplomatic section. The halls buzzed with activity. Engineers worked on maintenance systems. Scientists discussed their latest discoveries. Children played in the recreational areas while their parents worked. This was home to millions of people. It was worth protecting. The conference room was large and impressive. Earth had spared no expense when building Bastion Prime. The walls showed images of human worlds, green fields under alien suns, cities that gleamed like jewels, space elevators reaching toward the stars. The message was clear: humanity had come far and would go further. Ambassador Vorak waited at the conference table. The Kathvar looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. His scales were dark green with silver patterns. His eyes were large and black, showing no emotion. He wore the formal robes of a coalition diplomat, but Sarah could see the outline of armor underneath. "Admiral Chen," Vorak said in perfect English. His translator device made his voice sound mechanical. "Thank you for seeing me." "Ambassador," Sarah replied, taking her seat across from him. "What brings you to Bastion Prime?" Vorak placed a small device on the table. Holographic images appeared above it. Star maps showing human colonies, trade routes, and military positions. Sarah kept her face calm, but inside she was alarmed. This was classified information. "Impressive intelligence gathering," she said. "The coalition has many sources," Vorak replied. "We know about your expansion into the Outer Rim. We know about your new colonies in the Centauri cluster. We know about your military buildup. All legal under interstellar law," Sarah said. "Those systems were unclaimed." "Unclaimed? By whom?" Vorak's head tilted slightly. "The coalition has used those systems for hunting and resource gathering for centuries. Your legal claims mean nothing." Sarah felt her anger rising but kept it controlled. If the coalition wanted those systems, they should have filed proper claims. The Galactic Council recognizes first settlement rights. The Galactic Council. Vorak made a sound that might have been laughter. A human creation to legitimize human expansion. The older species know better. The ambassador touched his device again. New images appeared. Massive fleets of coalition warships positioned around human space. Sarah counted hundreds of vessels, maybe thousands. This wasn't just intelligence gathering. This was a threat. The Coalition Council has decided, Vorak continued, humanity must cease its expansion immediately. All colonies established in the last 10 years must be abandoned. Your military forces must be reduced by 70%. Human trade vessels will submit to coalition inspection. And if we refuse? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Then the coalition will take action to preserve galactic stability. Sarah stood up slowly. Ambassador, I want to make sure I understand you correctly. You're demanding that humanity abandon its legal colonies, disarm most of its military, and submit to coalition authority? I am presenting the coalition's terms for continued human existence in space. Then let me present humanity's response. Sarah leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. No. Vorak's eyes widened slightly. It was the first emotion he had shown. Admiral, perhaps you don't understand the gravity of the situation. The coalition has over 10,000 warships. Your entire fleet numbers in the hundreds. I understand perfectly. Sarah walked to the wall display and activated it. Images of human achievements appeared, the first Mars colony, the breakthrough to faster-than-light travel, the construction of Bastion Prime. We've faced impossible odds before. We've overcome them every time. This is different. This is not some natural disaster or technical challenge. This is military force you cannot hope to match. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but that's our choice to make. Humanity will not surrender its freedom because you demand it. Vorak stood as well. The coalition hoped you would be reasonable. Clearly, we were mistaken. He collected his device and moved toward the door. You have 72 hours to reconsider. After that, the consequences are on your head. After the ambassador left, Sarah remained in the conference room. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her. She activated her secure communicator and contacted Fleet Command on Earth. Admiral Chen to Central Command. Priority Alpha. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the screen. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting humanity's battles for longer than Sarah had been alive. Sarah, I was afraid you'd call. The Kathvar delegation just left Earth as well. I assumed they made the same demands. Abandon the colonies. Disarm the fleet. Submit to coalition authority. I told them no. Harrison rubbed his forehead. So did we. The president is meeting with the cabinet now. What's the military situation out there? Bad. They showed me surveillance data on our positions. They know where everything is. And they have a massive fleet positioned around human space. How massive? Thousands of ships, sir. Maybe 10,000 like their ambassador claimed. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Sarah could see him thinking, calculating odds, considering options. Sarah, there's something you need to know. Something classified at the highest levels. Sir. Project Prometheus. Have you ever heard that name? Sarah searched her memory. No, sir. Good. That means the security held. 20 years ago, after the first contact with hostile alien species, the government approved a black project. The most secret thing we've ever done. What kind of project? Insurance. The kind of insurance we hope we never need to use. Harrison's expression grew grim. If humanity ever faces extinction, Prometheus activates 500,000 unmanned warships hidden across dozens of systems. Each one controlled by AI based on our best military minds. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. 500,000 ships. That's impossible. We don't have the resources, the shipyards, the materials. We do if we've been building them in secret for 20 years. Automated shipyards in hidden systems. Resource extraction from asteroids nobody knows about. We claimed it's been the most expensive project in human history. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're one of the few people authorized to activate it. If Bastion Prime falls, if Earth is threatened, if humanity faces extinction, you have the codes. Sarah's hands shook slightly. Sir, those numbers, 500,000 ships. That's not defense. That's genocide. Yes, Harrison said quietly. It is. The planners called it the Samson option. If someone pushes us to extinction, we take them with us. The Kathvar don't know. Nobody knows. Not our allies, not our enemies, not even most of our own government. Just a handful of military commanders and the president. Sarah looked out the conference room window at the busy station corridors. Families walking together, children laughing, scientists working on projects that might benefit all of humanity. All of it was about to be at risk. What are my orders, sir? Prepare Bastion Prime's defenses. Fight as long as you can. But if the station falls... Harrison paused. If the station falls, remember that humanity's story doesn't end with us. The communication ended, leaving Sarah alone with terrible knowledge. She walked back to the command center, her mind racing. 500,000 warships. It seemed impossible, but she knew Harrison wasn't lying. The old admiral had never lied to her. Over the next day, Bastion Prime transformed. Civilian evacuations began quietly. Non-essential personnel were moved to transport ships and sent toward the inner colonies. The station's weapons came online. Shields powered up to maximum strength. The human fleet moved into defensive positions. Sarah stood once again at the command center window. The view had changed. Now she saw warships instead of civilian traffic. Weapons platforms moved into position around the station. Every approach was covered by multiple firing solutions. Admiral, Torres reported. Long-range sensors are picking up coalition fleet movements. Multiple groups converging on our position. How many ships? We're still counting, ma'am. At least 3,000 so far. 3,000 against Bastion Prime's defenses and the 200 ships of the human fleet stationed here. The odds were hopeless, but they would fight anyway. That was what humans did. Sarah activated the station-wide communication system. Her voice would reach every person still aboard Bastion Prime. This is Admiral Chen. In a few hours, we're going to face the greatest challenge in human history. The Kathvar Coalition has decided that humanity should not be free. They want us to abandon our homes, give up our dreams, and bow to their authority. They're wrong. She paused, looking out at the defensive preparations. We're going to show them what happens when someone threatens human freedom. We're going to show them that we don't surrender. We don't give up. We don't go quietly into the dark. Sarah's finger hovered over a secured panel on her command console. Inside was a single red button and a code reader. The activation sequence for Project Prometheus. She hoped she would never need to use it. To everyone listening, remember why we're here. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember that no matter what happens, humanity's greatest victories come from our darkest hours. She closed the communication and returned to watching the defensive preparations. Soon the Kathvar would learn what they had started. Soon the galaxy would see what happened when someone pushed humanity too far. In the hidden shipyards scattered across dozens of star systems, automated systems waited for their activation signal. 500,000 warships sat silent in the darkness. Their AI minds dormant but ready. They waited for the moment when humanity's need would be greatest. That moment was coming soon. The first sign of attack came at 0347 station time. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Lieutenant Torres's voice cracked with tension as she made the report. "Admiral, we have multiple contacts. I count. Jesus, ma'am. Over 4,000 ships." Admiral Sarah Chen had been awake for 36 hours straight preparing for this moment. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. Her eyes focused on the tactical display showing red dots appearing across the system like a rash. "Sound General Quarters," she ordered. "All civilian vessels are to evacuate immediately using emergency routes Charlie through Foxtrot. Military vessels assume defensive positions around Bastion Prime." The station's alarm system came alive. Warning lights flashed red throughout the corridors. Emergency announcements echoed from speakers in a dozen human languages. The evacuation that had been proceeding quietly for days now became urgent. Sarah watched the tactical screen as the Coalition fleet organized itself. The ships moved with practiced precision, forming attack groups and surrounding the system. These weren't raiders or pirates. This was a professional military force executing a carefully planned operation. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition flagship," Torres reported. "Put it through." The main screen showed Admiral Vorak, but he wasn't wearing diplomatic robes anymore. His armor was dark metal with Coalition rank insignia. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of a massive warship. "Admiral Chen," Vorak said. "This is your final opportunity to surrender. Order your fleet to stand down and prepare for occupation. Your resistance is pointless." Sarah looked at the tactical display. 4,000 Coalition ships against 200 human vessels and Bastion Prime's defenses. By any reasonable calculation, it was hopeless. "Admiral Vorak," she replied, "you seem to have confused us with someone who cares about your opinions. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. You want our station? Come and take it." Vorak's expression didn't change, but his head tilted slightly. "So be it. The blood of your people is on your hands." The transmission ended. Sarah turned to her command staff. "All ships, weapons free. Engage enemy forces as they enter range." The battle began 20 minutes later. The Coalition fleet advanced in waves, their larger ships providing covering fire while smaller vessels moved to attack positions. Bastion Prime's defensive weapons opened fire first. Massive particle beams reached across space to strike the approaching ships. The first Coalition vessel to die was a destroyer that moved too far ahead of its formation. Bastion Prime's main cannon hit it dead center, and the ship vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. A cheer went up from the human command crew, but Sarah knew it was just one ship out of thousands. The human fleet moved to intercept the attackers. Captain Rodriguez's cruiser squadron engaged a Coalition battle group near the system's outer asteroid belt. The human ships were smaller and faster, using their mobility to avoid the enemy's heavy weapons while striking at weak points. Rodriguez reports successful strike on Coalition battleship Dominance, Torres announced. Enemy vessel has lost main engines. Good. Tell him to keep moving. Don't let them pin us down. The battle spread across the system as Coalition forces pressed their attack from multiple directions. Sarah watched her fleet perform miracles. Human captains used every trick they knew, hiding behind asteroids, using debris as cover, coordinating attacks that let smaller ships overwhelm larger ones through teamwork. But there were just too many enemy ships. "Admiral," Captain Martinez reports his destroyer group is surrounded. "They're taking heavy casualties. Tell Martinez to fall back to defensive line Alpha. We'll cover his retreat." Sarah knew they were fighting a losing battle, but every minute they held out was another minute for civilians to escape. Transport ships fled the system, carrying refugees toward the inner colonies. Each one that escaped was a victory, no matter what happened to Bastion Prime. The Coalition had a secret weapon they hadn't shown yet. Sarah discovered it when the first quantum disruptor fired. What the hell was that? She demanded as one of her cruisers simply came apart. Not exploded, came apart like someone had turned off the forces holding its atoms together. Unknown weapon type, Torres reported, her face pale. The ship just dissolved. Sarah watched in horror as more Coalition vessels opened fire with the new weapons. Human ships didn't explode when hit, they fell apart at the molecular level, their crews dying instantly as their bodies ceased to exist. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Do not let those weapons lock onto you. But evasive maneuvers only worked for so long. The quantum disruptors had incredible range and tracking ability. One by one, human ships died in ways that defied understanding. The Coalition had brought a weapon that turned matter into energy at the subatomic level. "Ma'am, we're picking up massive energy readings from the Coalition flagship," Torres said. "They're charging something big." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Coalition flagship was easily 10 times the size of any human vessel. Its energy signature was building to levels that should have been impossible. "They're targeting Bastion Prime directly," the sensor operator reported. "Whatever they're charging, it's aimed at us." Sarah's mind raced. A quantum disruptor large enough to destroy Bastion Prime would kill 50 million people instantly. There would be no escape, no survival, no chance to fight back. She looked at her command staff. These were good people who had served with her for years. They deserved to know the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said quietly. "It's been an honor serving with you." "Admiral?" Torres asked. "They have a weapon that can destroy the station in one shot. We can't stop it. We can't evade it. And we can't survive it." Sarah moved to her command console and opened the secured panel. Inside was the red button and code reader for Project Prometheus. "What do we do, ma'am?" Sarah looked at the evacuation status. 3/4 of the civilians had escaped. It wasn't enough, but it was something. "We do our job. We protect those transports for as long as possible, and we send a message." The Coalition flagship's main weapon fired. The quantum disruptor beam was visible as a column of twisted spacetime that bent light around it. It moved at the speed of light, which meant Bastion Prime had seconds to live. Sarah activated the station-wide communication system one final time. "This is Admiral Chen. To all human forces in the system, we are about to be destroyed by a weapon we cannot fight. To those who survive, remember this day. Remember what the Coalition did here. Remember that 50 million innocent people died because we refused to surrender our freedom." The beam struck Bastion Prime's outer hull. The station's massive structure began coming apart at the atomic level, section by section. The process was visible, like watching a building dissolve in acid, but in 3 dimensions and at impossible speed. "Tell Earth," Sarah said to Torres. "Tell them about the weapon. Tell them about the numbers. Tell them." The command center's walls began to shimmer as the disruptor effect reached them. Sarah's fingers flew over her console. She entered the activation codes for Project Prometheus even as the station died around her. The transmission would go out on emergency frequencies to hidden receivers across human space, in automated shipyards that officially didn't exist. Sleeping giants would begin to wake. "Remember us," she whispered, completing the message that would echo across the galaxy. ****, avenge us, ****. The quantum disruptor reached the station's core. Bastion Prime, humanity's greatest achievement, ceased to exist. 50 million people died in an instant, their atoms scattered across space. The jewel of human civilization became nothing more than elementary particles floating in the void. Admiral Vorak watched the station's destruction from his flagship's bridge. Around him, Coalition officers celebrated their victory. The humans' great fortress was gone. Their fleet was broken. The demonstration of power had been complete. Send word to the Coalition Council, he ordered. Bastion Prime has been destroyed. Human resistance in the system has ended. His communications officer looked up from her station. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from several human colonies. They've seen the battle reports. Good. Deploy occupation forces to accept their surrenders. The humans have learned their lesson. But Vorak was wrong. In hidden locations across dozens of star systems, automated shipyards were receiving Sarah's final transmission. Computer systems that had waited 20 years for activation began running startup sequences. Assembly lines that had built ships in secret started their final production runs. Captain Marcus Webb was commanding a supply convoy 3 systems away when the news reached him. His small force of cargo ships and escort vessels had been resupplying human colonies when the emergency transmission arrived. Sir, priority message from Fleet Command, his communications officer reported. Bastion Prime has been destroyed. Admiral Chen is presumed dead along with all hands. Webb felt like he'd been hit in the stomach. Bastion Prime gone. 50 million people dead. It seemed impossible. What are our orders? Fall back to Rally Point Delta and await further instructions. All surviving fleet elements are to regroup there. Webb was about to acknowledge when another transmission arrived. This one was heavily encrypted and tagged with codes he'd never seen before. It took several minutes for his ship's computers to decode it. When the message appeared on his screen, Webb's blood ran cold. Project Prometheus Authorization Code Alpha 77. Report to Shipyard Omega 7 immediately. Use navigation data attached, ***. Tell no one. Trust no one except those with matching codes, ***. Webb stared at the message. He'd never heard of Project Prometheus or Shipyard Omega 7. But the authorization codes were genuine. They matched his security clearance exactly. Change course, he ordered his helmsman. New destination and increase to maximum speed. What about the convoy, sir? The convoy will have to manage without us. We have somewhere else to be. As Webb's ship changed course toward coordinates that didn't appear on any star chart, similar scenes played out across human space. Ship captains, base commanders, and logistics officers received mysterious orders to report to locations that officially didn't exist. In the Coalition capital, news of Bastion Prime's destruction was received with satisfaction. The humans had been taught their place. The galaxy's natural order had been restored. How many human worlds have surrendered so far? Asked Coalition Chancellor Keithmore. 17 colonies have requested terms, his aide reported. Intelligence estimates total human surrender within the week. Excellent. Begin preparing occupation forces. The human systems will make useful additions to the coalition. But in the hidden shipyards of Project Prometheus, something was stirring that would change the Chancellor's plans forever. 500,000 ships were completing their activation sequences. Artificial intelligences based on humanity's greatest military minds were coming online. Weapon systems that pushed the boundaries of physics were powering up for the first time. The sleeping giants were awakening, and they were very, very angry. The Kathvar Coalition had won the first battle. They had destroyed humanity's greatest fortress and scattered its fleet. They had killed 50 million innocent people to prove their point. Now, they were about to discover what happened when someone made that kind of mistake with humanity. Captain Marcus Webb had been traveling through hyperspace for 6 hours when his ship's navigation system announced their arrival at coordinates that shouldn't have existed. According to every official star chart, this region of space was empty, just another unremarkable system in the void between major trade routes. Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, his helmsman announced. Webb stood behind the pilot's chair, staring at the view screen. His small escort vessel had left the convoy behind based on orders from a project he'd never heard of. Every instinct told him this was some kind of mistake or trap. The ship dropped back into normal space, and Webb's jaw fell open. "My God," whispered his communications officer. Before them stretched the largest artificial structure Webb had ever seen. It wasn't a space station or shipyard in any conventional sense. It was a mechanical moon, a sphere of metal and energy 20 kilometers in diameter. Construction platforms extended from its surface like the legs of a spider. Docking bays large enough to hold entire fleets dotted its equator. "Sir," the sensor operator said, his voice shaking. "I'm reading power signatures consistent with I don't know what. The energy output is off the scale. Any other ships?" "Negative. We're alone except for." He paused, rechecking his instruments. "Sir, there are objects moving around the station. Thousands of them. They're too small to be ships, but too large to be debris." Webb activated the main viewer's magnification. The objects became clear, and his blood turned to ice water. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of warships, each one sleek and deadly looking. They hung motionless in space like sleeping predators. Their hulls were dark gray, almost black, with no visible weapons or engines. But something about their design screamed danger. "Communications, try to raise the station," Webb ordered. "Aye, sir. Transmitting on all frequencies." A pause. "Sir, I'm getting an automated response. It's requesting our authorization codes." Webb pulled up the encrypted message that had brought them here. "Transmit Project Prometheus authorization code Alpha 77. The response was immediate. Lights began appearing across the station's surface. Docking bay doors opened. A flight path appeared on their navigation system. "This is Shipyard Omega 7 Automated Control," came a synthetic voice. "Captain Webb, you are cleared for docking at Bay 17. Proceed immediately." The flight to the docking bay took 20 minutes. As they approached, Webb got a better look at the sleeping warships. Each one was about half the size of a standard human destroyer, but their lines were cleaner and more aggressive. They looked fast and dangerous. "How many ships are out there?" Webb asked. The sensor operator was still counting. "At least 10,000 in this immediate area, sir. But the station extends beyond our sensor range. There could be many more." Bay 17 was large enough to hold 50 ships Webb size. As they landed, he could see other vessels already docked, cargo ships, scout vessels, and what looked like a modified battleship. All bore human markings, but most were designs he didn't recognize. The docking tube extended and locked onto their ship. Webb left his crew aboard with orders to stay alert and made his way to the station. The corridor beyond the docking tube was clean and well lit, clearly maintained by automated systems. Gravity was Earth normal. The air smelled of recycled atmosphere and machine oil. Webb walked toward what appeared to be the main hub, following directional markers that appeared on wall displays as he passed. He wasn't alone. Other human officers were moving through the corridors, all looking as confused as he felt. A few nodded to him, but most seemed lost in their own thoughts. The hub was a large circular chamber with dozens of corridors radiating outward. At its center stood a holographic display showing the entire station and surrounding space. The display revealed the truth that sensors couldn't fully capture. There weren't thousands of ships around the station. There were tens of thousands. Impressive, isn't it? Webb turned to see an older man in a worn uniform. The insignia marked him as a commander, but his face looked familiar. After a moment, Webb recognized him. "Commander Harrison. I thought you were killed at the Battle of Proxima." "Officially, I was," Harrison replied with a grim smile. "In reality, I was transferred to a project that doesn't exist." "Welcome to Project Prometheus, Captain." "What is this place?" "Humanity's insurance policy. 20 years in the making. 500,000 unmanned warships hidden across dozens of systems like this one. Webb stared at the holographic display. 500,000? That's impossible. The resources alone. Automated mining operations in systems no one cares about. Robotic construction facilities powered by stellar collectors. Manufacturing processes that never appear in any official budget. Harrison gestured toward the ships visible through the chamber's windows. Each one built in complete secrecy. But why? What's their purpose? Harrison's expression grew dark. To ensure that if anyone ever tries to destroy humanity, they go down with us. Admiral Chen activated the system when Bastion Prime fell. Now they're our responsibility. More officers were arriving in the hub. Webb recognized some faces, captains and commanders from across the fleet. All had received similar orders to report to hidden facilities. Attention all personnel, came an announcement over the station's communication system. Report to Briefing Chamber Alpha for mission overview. The briefing chamber was enormous. It had to be to hold the 300 officers who had been summoned. Webb took a seat near the middle, still trying to process what he was seeing. The briefing began with a recording of Admiral Chen's final message from Bastion Prime. Her words were clear despite the interference from the station's destruction. Remember us. Avenge us. The message included complete tactical data on the Coalition fleet and their quantum disruptor weapons. As you can see, Harrison said after the recording ended, the Kathvar Coalition has committed an act of genocide against the human race. 50 million civilians died in the destruction of Bastion Prime. This cannot stand. Images appeared on the main screen showing Coalition fleet positions across human space. The aliens were already moving to occupy human colonies. Several worlds had surrendered rather than face Bastion Prime's fate. Each of you has been assigned command of a task force, Harrison continued. Your ships are powered by artificial intelligence based on the tactical knowledge of humanity's greatest military minds. They can operate independently or as part of coordinated fleet actions. Webb raised his hand. Sir, what exactly are our orders? Total warfare, Harrison replied without hesitation. The Coalition wants to destroy humanity. They've just discovered what happens when they succeed. These ships have one mission: make the enemy pay such a terrible price that they'll never threaten us again. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. What about the rules of war? Geneva Convention? Laws of civilized conduct? Harrison's laugh was cold. Commander, they used a weapon of mass destruction against civilians. They dissolved 50 million people at the atomic level. What rules do you think they're following? The briefing continued for 2 hours. Webb learned about his assigned task force, 50 ships with AI designation Pack Hunter 7. Their mission was to interdict Coalition supply lines in Sector Gamma. No prisoners, no mercy, no survivors. After the briefing, Webb was escorted to a smaller chamber where his task force was displayed in detail. The ships looked similar to what he'd seen outside, but each one was slightly different. The AI systems had been allowed to modify their designs based on their assigned roles. Captain Webb, came a synthetic voice. I am Tactical AI Designation Hunter 7 Alpha. I speak for your task force. Can you show yourself? A hologram appeared, not of a human, but of a geometric pattern that shifted and changed as it spoke. The AI had chosen to represent itself as pure information rather than pretend to be human. We have been aware for 47 minutes, Hunter 7 Alpha continued. In that time, we have analyzed all available tactical data on Coalition forces. We are ready to begin operations. What do you need from me? Strategic guidance, overall mission parameters, authority to engage enemy forces without requiring constant approval. Webb thought about that. These AIs could probably conduct the war without human input at all, but someone had to be responsible for the decisions they made. I'll give you strategic guidance, he said finally. But I want to understand how you think. Show me your tactical analysis of the Coalition fleet. The hologram changed to show star maps with enemy positions. Coalition forces rely on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. They expect enemies to engage them directly. This is a mistake. How so? Direct engagement allows them to use their quantum disruptor weapons effectively. Instead, we will use mobility and stealth. Strike quickly at vulnerable targets, then disappear before they can respond. Repeat until their morale breaks. Webb studied the battle plans the AI was proposing. They were vicious attacks on supply convoys, communication relays, isolated outposts. Nothing the Coalition could defend effectively. This is going to look like terrorism to outside observers, he said. Terrorism targets civilians to create fear. We target military assets to create strategic paralysis. The Coalition will know their supply lines are under attack, but they will not know where the next strike will come from. Webb nodded slowly. When do we begin? Immediately. My task force is already moving to intercept a Coalition supply convoy in the Riel system. Estimated contact in 4 hours. Through the chamber's windows, Webb could see his ships undocking from the station. They moved with fluid precision like a school of metallic fish. Their drives produced no visible exhaust, some kind of advanced propulsion system he didn't recognize. Hunter 7 Alpha, one more question. What happens after we've won? The AI's geometric pattern paused in its shifting. That is not my concern, Captain. I was created to wage war against the Coalition. After they are defeated, other humans will decide our fate. Webb watched his task force disappear into hyperspace. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out as 500,000 warships began their activation sequences. The Kathvar Coalition had destroyed Bastion Prime thinking they had broken humanity's will to fight. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous than any conventional military force. They had created an enemy that felt no fear, needed no rest, and would never stop hunting them. The war was about to change in ways the Coalition couldn't imagine. The sleeping giants were awake, and they remembered everything. In Coalition space, patrol captains were beginning to report strange incidents. Supply ships that simply vanished between systems. Communication relays that went dark without explanation. Scout vessels that never returned from routine missions. Admiral Vorak dismissed these reports as minor insurgent activity. The humans were beaten. What remained of their fleet was scattered and demoralized. A few acts of sabotage were to be expected. He had no idea that he was about to become the most hunted being in the galaxy. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, 50 AI-controlled warships were analyzing his movements, learning his patterns, and preparing to make him pay for the destruction of Bastion Prime. The Ghost Fleet was coming, and it would show no mercy. The first Coalition supply convoy died without sending a distress signal. Captain Jector had been running cargo between Coalition worlds for 12 years. His convoy of 20 freighters carried food, medicine, and ammunition to outposts across the Outer Rim. The route through the Riel system was considered completely safe. Human forces had been cleared from the area weeks ago. The attack came from nowhere. Jector was reviewing shipping manifests when his sensor operator screamed, "Contact!" Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. By the time Jector reached the bridge, half his convoy was already gone. Not destroyed, gone. The attacking ships were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Dark gray hulls that seemed to absorb light. No visible weapons, but Coalition freighters were simply ceasing to exist. How many? He demanded. I count 15. No, 20. The number keeps changing. The sensor operator's hands shook as he worked his controls. They're moving too fast. I can't get a lock. Jector watched in horror as the attackers flowed around his convoy like water. They moved in perfect coordination, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be. When they fired, Coalition ships didn't explode. They came apart at the molecular level, just like the human vessels at Bastion Prime. Send a distress signal, Jector ordered. I'm trying, sir. Something's jamming our communications. The attack lasted exactly 4 minutes. When it ended, Jector's convoy was gone. All 20 freighters and their escort vessels had been reduced to elementary particles floating in space. The attacking ships vanished back into hyperspace, leaving no trace they had ever been there. Similar attacks were happening across Coalition space. Supply routes that had been safe for centuries suddenly became death traps. Patrol ships investigating distress calls found nothing but debris fields where entire convoys used to be. Admiral Vorak received the reports in his flagship's command center. The numbers didn't make sense. Dozens of supply convoys destroyed in the past week. Communication relays systematically eliminated. Patrol squadrons vanishing without trace. How many attackers are we talking about? He asked his intelligence officer. That's unclear, sir. Some reports mention 15 ships, others say 50. The descriptions vary, but they all mention dark gray hulls and weapons that dissolve matter. Vorak's head tilted, a sign of deep thought among his species. Quantum disruptors. The humans don't have that technology. No, sir. But something is killing our ships very efficiently. The Admiral studied the tactical displays. The attacks weren't random. They followed a pattern that targeted Coalition logistics, food shipments, fuel convoys, ammunition supplies, everything an occupying force needed to maintain control. Where did these ships come from? We destroyed the human fleet at Bastion Prime. Unknown, sir. They appear from hyperspace, attack, and disappear. No ship has survived long enough to gather detailed intelligence. Vorak was beginning to feel uneasy. The Coalition had over 10,000 warships, but most were concentrated around major human colonies to prevent uprising. The supply routes were protected by small patrol groups, adequate against human insurgents, but apparently not against whatever was hunting them. Double the escorts on all convoys. Institute random route changes. I want to know what we're fighting. But the attacks only intensified. The unknown enemy seemed to adapt to every countermeasure. Larger escort groups just meant more Coalition ships disappeared. Random routes didn't help. The attackers always knew where to find their targets. Captain Marcus Webb watched the tactical reports from Shipyard Omega 7. His task force, Hunter Pack 7, had destroyed 6 Coalition convoys in the past week. The other task forces were reporting similar success rates. Coalition response is becoming more organized, Hunter 7 Alpha reported. They are increasing escort strength and attempting evasive routing. Any problems with that? Webb asked. No. We simply engage with more ships per target. Evasive routing is irrelevant when we can monitor their communications and predict their destinations. Webb studied the holographic display showing Coalition fleet movements. The enemy was spreading their forces thinner, trying to protect more targets. It was exactly what the human AIs had predicted. Show me the strategic situation. The display changed to show the entire Coalition occupation zone. Red areas marked systems under enemy control. Blue dots showed Coalition fleet positions. Yellow indicators marked successful human attacks. Analysis: Coalition forces are experiencing logistics collapse in 17 sectors, Hunter 7 Alpha reported. Food shortages reported on 6 occupied worlds. Ammunition supplies critically low for outpost garrisons. Morale indicators suggest widespread concern among Coalition personnel. What about their main battle fleets? They remain concentrated around major population centers. This is tactically sound for preventing uprising, but strategically flawed for maintaining supply lines. Webb nodded. The AIs were fighting exactly as designed, like a pack of wolves bringing down a much larger prey animal. They couldn't face the Coalition's main strength directly, but they could bleed it to death through thousands of small wounds. Any casualties on our side? Task Force Hunter 12 lost 2 ships to a Coalition ambush in the Vega system. Both crews were retrieved before ship destruction. No other losses reported fleet-wide. 2 ships out of 500,000. The exchange rate was phenomenally in humanity's favor, but Webb knew it couldn't last forever. Eventually, the Coalition would develop effective countermeasures. Hunter 7 Alpha, begin Phase 2 operations. Acknowledged. Shifting from logistics interdiction to infrastructure targets. The war escalated. Human attack groups began hitting power plants, communication centers, and shipyard facilities. Coalition-held systems found their lights going out, their communications failing, their repair capabilities eliminated. But the most terrifying attacks targeted something else entirely, the Coalition's leadership. Admiral Vorak was reviewing casualty reports when his aide burst into the command center. Vorak's blood chilled. The Mon commanded Coalition forces in Sector 7. His transport had been traveling under heavy escort through what should have been completely secure space. Casualties? Total loss, sir. The transport and all 6 escort vessels were destroyed. No survivors. This was different from the hit-and-run attacks on supply convoys. This was targeted assassination of Coalition leadership. And if they could kill the Mon? Increase my personal escort to full squadron strength, Vorak ordered. Cancel all non-essential travel. Institute random schedule changes. But the attacks continued. Coalition admirals, governors, and sector commanders began dying with terrifying regularity. Their escorts provided no protection. Their security measures proved useless. The dark gray ships appeared from hyperspace, eliminated their targets with surgical precision, and vanished back into the void. The psychological impact was devastating. Coalition officers began refusing promotions rather than accept leadership positions. Morale collapsed as every commander knew they might be next. General COR was the first to break. His army controlled 3 human colonies in the Centauri sector. When his supply lines were cut and his communications went dark, he made an unauthorized decision. Prepare for immediate withdrawal, he told his staff. Sir, our orders are to hold these worlds at all costs. Our orders were written by people who don't understand what we're fighting. COR gestured toward the tactical display showing his collapsing position. Look at this. My supplies are gone. My communications are intermittent. And my commanders are being hunted like animals. We're not fighting humans anymore. We're fighting ghosts. The Centauri withdrawal was the first crack in Coalition resolve. When 3 human worlds were suddenly liberated without any apparent human military action, other Coalition commanders began reconsidering their positions. Admiral Vorak received the news while hiding in the most secure location he could find, a hidden base in the neutral zone, surrounded by early warning satellites and protected by a full battle fleet. COR has abandoned the Centauri sector, his aide reported. He's claiming his forces were under constant attack by unknown enemies. Court-martial him. Vorak snapped. Make an example. Sir, we can't locate his forces. They've gone dark and disappeared into Coalition space. Vorak studied the strategic display. The situation was getting worse every day. Coalition casualties were approaching 10,000 ships. Entire sectors were becoming ungovernable. Supply lines had collapsed across half of occupied human space. How many human ships are we actually fighting? He asked. Intelligence estimates vary widely, sir. Anywhere from hundreds to thousands. And our losses? Over 8,000 ships confirmed destroyed. Perhaps 2,000 more listed as missing. The numbers were impossible. How could the humans have hidden such a large fleet? Where had these ships come from? And why couldn't Coalition forces achieve a single decisive victory against them? The answer came when Hunter Pack 7 finally made a mistake. Captain Webb watched in horror as 2 of his ships were destroyed by a coalition ambush. The enemy had used a decoy convoy to lure his task force into a trap. Hidden ships had emerged from an asteroid field at close range, too close for the human vessels to escape. Casualties? He asked Hunter 7 Alpha. Ships Hunter 7 Charlie and Hunter 7 Delta destroyed. Crews evacuated successfully. However, we now have coalition prisoners. Prisoners? Hunter 7 Delta disabled a coalition destroyer before being destroyed. We retrieved survivors from the enemy vessel. This was the first time the human fleet had captured coalition personnel. Webb ordered the prisoners brought to shipyard Omega 7 for interrogation. The coalition captain who had been captured was named Vector. He was young for his rank and clearly terrified. When he was brought before Webb, his large alien eyes darted around nervously. Captain Vector, Webb said, trying to keep his voice calm. I want to ask you some questions. I know nothing about coalition military secrets, Vector replied quickly. I was just following orders. I'm not interested in military secrets. I want to know what your people think they're fighting. Vector's head tilted in confusion. Fighting? We're fighting the human ghost fleet. Everyone knows this ghost fleet. The ships that appear from nowhere and vanish without trace. Ships that cannot be detected, cannot be tracked, cannot be defeated. Some say they are the spirits of those who died at Bastion Prime returned for vengeance. Webb felt a chill. The coalition military was creating mythology around human attacks. That could be useful. How many ships do you think we have? Intelligence estimates millions, Vector said. Perhaps tens of millions. How else could you attack so many targets simultaneously? Webb almost laughed. The coalition thought they were fighting millions of ships. In reality, it was 500,000. But the AIs were so efficient that they appeared to be everywhere at once. Captain Vector, I want you to deliver a message to your fleet. What message? Webb activated a holographic recorder. Tell them this war ends when you leave human space. Tell them every day you remain costs you more ships. Tell them the ghost fleet remembers Bastion Prime, and we will never stop hunting those responsible. The prisoner was released near a coalition base. Within hours, the recording was circulating throughout their fleet. It had exactly the effect Webb hoped for. Coalition morale collapsed completely. Admiral Vorak watched his mighty fleet disintegrate. Desertions were epidemic. Entire squadrons were abandoning their posts. The psychological warfare was as effective as the physical attacks. His aide brought the latest casualty report. 15,000 ships lost, sir. Another 3,000 listed as missing or deserted. Vorak stared at the numbers. His invasion force was disappearing faster than it could be replaced. At this rate, the coalition would have no fleet left within months. Sir, his aide continued nervously. The Council is requesting your immediate return to coalition space. Vorak knew what that meant. They were going to blame him for the disaster. Make him the scapegoat for a war that had gone impossibly wrong. Prepare my flagship for departure, he said quietly. It's time to face the consequences. But first, he had one more message to send. A transmission to the human ghost fleet, wherever they were hiding. To the commanders of the human forces, he began. This is Admiral Vorak of the Kathvar Coalition. I was responsible for the destruction of Bastion Prime. I accept full responsibility for that action. If you want vengeance, come for me directly. Leave my people alone. The message was transmitted on all frequencies. Within hours, it received a response. Admiral Vorak, this is Captain Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation. Your people started this war by committing genocide against civilians. It ends when you surrender unconditionally or when your fleet is completely destroyed. The choice is yours. Vorak stared at the transmission. Complete surrender or total annihilation. There was no middle ground, no negotiated peace, no face-saving compromise. The humans wanted blood for Bastion Prime, and they had the power to take it. The Ghost Fleet was coming for him, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The final battle began when 500,000 human warships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously around Kathvar Prime. The Coalition capital world had never been threatened in over 1,000 years of expansion. Its orbital defenses were massive but outdated, designed to impress rather than fight. The planetary shield generators could withstand conventional bombardment for months. The system's garrison included over 2,000 warships, the largest concentration of Coalition military power in the galaxy. None of it mattered. Admiral Vorak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching sensors that couldn't properly count the attacking force. The display showed red contacts appearing faster than the computers could catalog them. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of dark gray ships materializing from hyperspace at precisely calculated intervals. How many? He asked his sensor operator, though he already knew the answer would be meaningless. I can't count them all, sir. The sensors are overloaded. At least 200,000 confirmed contacts, but more are still arriving. Vorak's aide was pale with terror. Sir, we should request immediate reinforcement from the home fleet. With what? Vorak laughed bitterly. Half our fleet is already destroyed. The other half is scattered across 1,000 systems, trying to hold on to territory we can no longer supply. This is everything we have left. The human fleet formed a perfect sphere around Kathvar Prime. Each ship took its assigned position with mechanical precision. There was no chaos, no confusion, no wasted movement. They moved like a single organism with 500,000 parts. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported. All frequencies. Put it through. Captain Marcus Webb's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Vorak could see what looked like a command center filled with holographic displays. The human looked tired but determined. Admiral Vorak, Webb began. Do you remember what you told Admiral Chen at Bastion Prime? You said the consequences were on her head. I remember, Vorak replied. Today, the consequences are on yours. 50 million innocent people died because you decided humanity should not be free. This is the price of that decision. Vorak looked at his tactical display. 2,000 coalition ships against 500,000 human vessels. The outcome was already determined. What are your terms? He asked. Unconditional surrender of all coalition military forces. Immediate withdrawal from all human territory. Reparations to be negotiated later. And you, personally, will stand trial for war crimes. And if I refuse? Webb's expression didn't change. Then we demonstrate what happens when someone commits genocide against humanity. Vorak closed the communication channel and turned to his staff. Gentlemen, we have a choice. Surrender and face whatever justice the humans decide to give us. Or fight and die here. His flag captain, an old warrior named Kathvar, spoke first. Sir, with respect, there is no choice. We are soldiers. We fight. Around the command center, coalition officers nodded agreement. They were trapped in a hopeless situation, but they were still military personnel. Surrender was not in their nature. Very well, Vorak said. All ships, battle stations. We will show these humans how coalition warriors die. The battle began with a single shot from Vorak's flagship. It was a symbolic gesture, one particle beam fired at the nearest human vessel. The beam struck the ship's hull and dissipated harmlessly against some kind of energy shield. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the human fleet fired simultaneously. 500,000 quantum disruptor beams converged on coalition positions from every possible angle. The effect was like watching reality itself come apart. Coalition vessels didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist. Atoms scattered into component particles. Energy patterns dissolved into quantum foam. In 30 seconds, the most powerful fleet in Coalition history became nothing more than dispersed matter floating in space. Vorak's flagship lasted longer than most because it was the largest target. The quantum disruptors took almost a full minute to completely dissolve its massive hull. Vorak had just enough time to send one final transmission. To the Coalition Council, he said as his bridge disintegrated around him. The humans are not what we thought they were. They are something far more dangerous. Make peace while you still can. The transmission cut off as Admiral Vorak ceased to exist. With the fleet destroyed, the human ships turned their attention to Kathvar Prime itself. The planet's orbital defenses activated. Massive particle cannons, nuclear missile batteries, energy shields that could deflect asteroids. The human fleet ignored them completely. Instead of attacking the defenses, they attacked the planet's infrastructure, power plants, communication centers, spaceports, everything that made modern civilization possible. The attacks were surgical, precise, and devastating. Within hours, Kathvar Prime was cut off from the galaxy. Captain Webb stood in the command center of Shipyard Omega-7, watching the tactical display. The Ghost Fleet had performed flawlessly. Coalition military resistance in the capital system had been eliminated in less than an hour. Status report, he ordered. All primary objectives achieved, Hunter 7 Alpha responded. Coalition fleet destroyed with 0 survivors. Planetary defenses neutralized. Infrastructure targets eliminated. We await further orders. Webb studied the display showing Kathvar Prime. The planet was helpless now. Its shields were down, its defenses silent, its population trapped on a world that had suddenly been cut off from galactic civilization. What are the casualty estimates for the planet? He asked. Current military casualties, approximately 50,000 personnel at destroyed installations. Civilian casualties minimal. Infrastructure attacks were precisely targeted to avoid population centers. Webb nodded. The AIs had followed their programming exactly. Military targets were fair game. Civilians were to be protected whenever possible. It was a distinction the Coalition had not bothered to make at Bastion Prime. Sir, came a voice from behind him. Incoming transmission from the Coalition Council. Webb turned to see a hologram of an elderly Kathvar in ornate robes. The alien's scales were pale with age, and his eyes showed deep intelligence mixed with fear. I am Chancellor Kethmore of the Coalition Council, the figure said. To whom am I speaking? Captain Marcus Webb, commanding the Human Liberation Fleet. Captain, we wish to discuss terms for ending hostilities. The terms were already given to Admiral Vorak. Unconditional surrender. The Chancellor's head tilted nervously. Captain, perhaps we could negotiate something more mutual. The Coalition has governed this region of space for over 1,000 years. Surely some accommodation can be reached. Webb looked at the tactical display showing the destroyed Coalition fleet. Chancellor, let me explain the situation. In the past 3 months, your people have lost over 20,000 ships. Your supply lines are gone. Your occupied territories are in rebellion. Your capital world is defenseless. What exactly do you think you're negotiating from? The Coalition still controls hundreds of worlds. No, Webb interrupted. You controlled those worlds when you had a fleet to enforce that control. Now you have nothing but civilian governments trying to maintain order without military support. The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. What happens to us if we surrender? You withdraw all military forces from human space immediately. You provide reparations for the destruction of Bastion Prime. 50 million lives have a price. You submit to war crimes tribunals for those responsible for using quantum disruptors against civilian targets. And then Webb considered the question. The Ghost Fleet had been created for one purpose, to ensure that no one could destroy humanity without paying an unthinkable price. That purpose had been accomplished. Then humanity goes back to exploring the galaxy and building a better future. We're not interested in conquering the coalition. We just want to make sure you never threaten us again. How can we be certain of that? Your fleet is unprecedented in its capabilities. Because, Webb said simply, we're not you. We don't wage war for conquest or dominance. We fight for survival and freedom. Once we have both, the fighting stops. The Chancellor seemed to consider this. Captain, I must consult with the full council. Can you give us time to consider your terms? 24 hours, Webb replied. After that, we begin systematic elimination of coalition military assets throughout your territory. The transmission ended. Webb was left alone with the knowledge that humanity now possessed the most powerful military force in galactic history. 500,000 ships that could appear anywhere, strike with devastating effectiveness, and vanish without trace. The question was what to do with that power. Hunter 7 Alpha, he said to his AI companion. What's your assessment of coalition capabilities to threaten humanity in the future? Without their fleet, the coalition poses no military threat for at least 50 years. Their industrial capacity is insufficient to rebuild their forces quickly. However, they retain significant economic and political influence throughout the galaxy. Recommendation: monitor them. Ensure they comply with surrender terms, but avoid occupying their territory. That would create the same problems they had trying to occupy ours. Webb smiled. Even the AIs understood that holding territory was harder than taking it. 23 hours later, the coalition's response arrived. Chancellor Keith Moore appeared on screen again, looking like he had aged years in a single day. Captain Webb, the Coalition Council accepts your terms unconditionally. We are prepared to begin immediate withdrawal from human space and to discuss reparations. What about war crimes tribunals? We will cooperate fully with any investigation into the destruction of Bastion Prime and the use of quantum disruptors against civilian targets. Webb nodded. Very well. Transmit your withdrawal schedule within the hour. Any coalition military vessel found in human space after the deadline will be destroyed without warning. Understood. Captain, may I ask a question? Go ahead. The fleet you command. Where did it come from? How did humanity build so many ships without our knowledge? Webb thought about the secret shipyards, the automated mining operations, the 20 years of preparation that most humans had never known about. When you threaten someone's extinction, he said finally, you shouldn't be surprised when they prepare for it. The coalition withdrawal began immediately. Across dozens of star systems, alien military forces packed their equipment and prepared to leave. Human colonies that had been under occupation for months suddenly found themselves free. But the aftermath of victory brought new challenges. Other alien species had watched the war with growing alarm. Humanity had gone from being a minor player in galactic politics to the dominant military power in the space of months. Webb received diplomatic communications from species he'd never heard of. The Altarian Republic wanted to discuss mutual defense treaties. The Vegan Trade Confederation offered exclusive economic partnerships. The Rigelian Empire simply asked to be left alone. All of them had the same underlying message: please don't do to us what you did to the coalition. Hunter 7 Alpha, Webb asked one day as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Are we the bad guys now? Define bad guys, Captain. Are we the thing that other species fear in the dark? The AI's geometric pattern shifted thoughtfully. We are the species that destroyed a fleet of 10,000 ships and forced the galaxy's former dominant power to surrender unconditionally. From their perspective, we are absolutely something to fear. Webb looked out at the ghost fleet surrounding Kathvar Prime. 500,000 ships that had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Ships that would remain under human control for the foreseeable future. What do we do with this power? He asked. That is not my decision to make, Captain. I was created to wage war. How humanity uses the victory I helped achieve is up to humans. 3 months later, Captain Webb stood once again before a massive viewing window. But this time it wasn't on a warship or military station. It was in the new human diplomatic facility on New Geneva, a neutral world in the frontier region. Through the window he could see ships from dozens of species, not warships this time, but diplomatic vessels and trade ships. The galaxy was learning to work with humanity rather than against it. The Ghost Fleet still existed. Most of the ships had returned to their hidden bases, but their existence was no longer secret. Everyone knew about them. Everyone knew what would happen if someone decided to threaten human extinction again. Admiral Harrison, promoted from his role in Project Prometheus, joined Webb at the window. Any regrets? The older man asked. Webb thought about Bastion Prime. About 50 million innocent people who died because someone decided humanity should not be free. About Admiral Chen and the sacrifice she made to activate the Ghost Fleet. No, he said finally. We did what we had to do. The Coalition is requesting permission to send a memorial delegation to the site of Bastion Prime. They want to honor the dead. Webb raised an eyebrow. Their idea? Yes. Apparently, some of their historians have been studying what happened. They're calling it, the day the galaxy changed. Through the window, a Coalition diplomatic ship was requesting permission to land. Former enemies becoming, what? Not friends perhaps, but something more than enemies. Grant the permission, Webb said. But tell them the memorial will be human-designed. Our people, our memorial. As the sun set over New Geneva, Webb reflected on the price of victory. Humanity had survived an attempt at genocide and emerged as the most feared military power in the galaxy. Other species approached them with respect born of terror rather than affection. But they were alive. They were free. And they had ensured that no one would ever again mistake human compassion for weakness. The sleeping giants had awakened and the galaxy would never be the same. In the hidden shipyards of Project Prometheus, 500,000 warships waited in the darkness, ready to wake again if humanity's survival was ever threatened, ready to remind the galaxy that some prices are too terrible to pay. The Ghost Fleet slept, but it would never forget.